Welcome to The Rational Egoist. I'm your host, Michael Leibowitz. Several years ago, while reading a book by Nathaniel Branden, he mentioned something that has stuck with me, and that's he wondered about what the effect the parents lying has on their children. And he said that at the time he wasn't aware of any studies being done on it. But now it seems there have been, and today's guest has written about them, and I'm very happy to have him. He's a globally recognized scholar and member of the Department of Applied Psychology and Human Development at the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education. Professor Kang Lee, welcome to the program.
Thank you very, very much for having me.
So, in reading one of these studies, I came across this. I guess it's an actual term, parenting by lying. What does it mean?
Okay, so we made up this term. So, so this term refers to the fact that parents actually lie to their children for purportedly for the purpose of parenting their children.
Okay, and are they trying to elicit responses? It's basically they're trying to control behavior, right? So they want to get the kids to feel a certain way, to act a certain way. Can you give me some examples?
Yes, so parents actually tell all sorts of lies to their children. So they are the first kind of lies they tell their children, as you said, are lies to control their behavior. So we call them instrumental lies. So, for example, this is very typical. Your child acts up in the grocery store, wants the candy, and you don't want to give your child the candy. The child throws a temper tantrum. You say, okay, if you continue to throw a temper tantrum, I'm going to call the police, and she will put in jail. So that would be a very typical parenting by lying, because you want to control your child's emotion and behavior in the public, and then but you are not going to call the police, and they are not going to arrest them, put them in jail. So that's a very typical parenting by lying.
Oh, how important is it in those situations if you're going to make I guess, threat, how important is it to follow through? Like I babysit my girlfriend's son. And if I tell him, if you don't do X, I'm going to turn off the television and take away the toys. And when he then doesn't do what I want, I do that. I turn off the television and take away the toys, and I explain to him why. Because it's important to me that he understands there's going to be a consequence, not just an empty threat like I'm going to call the cops, for instance, which I guess some parents do.
Yes. So this is the big difference between what you did and some of the parents did when they use parenting by lying, because they have no intention whatsoever to follow through with their threat. So then to a child, if nothing really happens, then the child may lose trust in you. That's one thing. But another thing actually is more important. The child now knows you are lying to them. And that this kind of models to the child about how to tell lies. Anyhow, so this is just one kind of lies we parents tell to our children, and we are all guilty of that. And there are other kinds of lies we tell. You also mentioned that there are somehow parents find that's necessary as well. For example, so these are lies you tell to kind of to spare their emotions. For example, your child plays a piano piece. It's just terrible. But you want to encourage your child. You say, oh, it's so wonderful. I love it. You are such an artist, something like this, right? So you feel that, the child needs to be encouraged by using lies. And this is another kind of parenting by lying. And there's another kind of, for example, sometimes parents feel your child is too young to deal with certain complex issues. And for example, the family pet died, the family dog died. You say, oh, we actually took the dog to your uncle's farm, and because there's more room for the dog to run around. Instead of telling your child the truth that the dog has died, because you think your child cannot deal with the complex issues of death. And so these are the situations you find, justified as a parent to lie to your children.
When I was a little kid, breakdancing, what was all the rage. And I did it, and I wasn't good at it at all. And I knew I wasn't good at it. I knew that my friends were better. My mother, nonetheless, told me, "Oh, you're so good," and I knew that this wasn't true. How able are kids generally to discern that their parents are lying to them?
So some parents are better liars than others. So some kids may discover their parents' lies somewhere around, let's say, their teenager years, and some are even later, like high school or university years. I can tell you a few these stories later. But some young kids actually are quite sensitive to their parents' untruth. Let's put it this way. And from a very young age, we sometimes think kids are stupid. Young kids, particularly preschoolers, they don't know anything. So then we say, okay, when I lie to them, they cannot figure it out. But some of the kids actually are very sensitive to the truth and the falsity, and they can actually detect this. So I'm talking about kids as young as 4 and 5 years of age. So I don't know how old you were, this kind of situations when your parents are telling you white lies, so-called white lies. We sometimes can sense it because their parents are not very sincere when they are saying this. So as a child, we are sensitive to this and we can detect that.
Now, once kids discern that their parents have lied to them, how does it affect the parent-child relationship in terms of trust, in terms of the view the child has of the parent?
So as you said, the author you mentioned said, nobody really did it very much study about, when parents lie to their kids, what happened. So in the last 10 years or so, and we've been working with people all over the world and to study, the long-term consequences of lying to your children. And initially, as a scientist, I didn't know very much, as the author said, about, what kind, there actually existed the so-called parenting by lying. That's why we coined the word, parenting by lying, because, in the literature, nobody ever mentioned it. And then, number one. Then number two was that I thought, these kind of lies are necessary and innocuous, and it's not going to have any impact on children. And it's practiced practically all over the world. And if we ask your audience, to remember the lies their parents told them, they could easily tell you a few. So I always thought it was not going to have a long-term impact. However, so now we have quite a bit of studies done, and we found the amount of parenting by lying you do as a parent can have some short-term and long-term consequences. So what are the short-term consequences? One of the biggest one is your children lying back to you. So the more you tell parenting by lying, that is telling lies to your kids for parenting purposes, the more likely your children are going to lie back to you according to their self-report. That's number one. So these are short-term ones. And there's a long-term ones, as you mentioned, the relationship between you. So you kind of slowly lose this trust between you and your child. So your relationship becomes strained in a certain way. So the quality becomes less trusting than before. And then there are, serious long-term consequences. So one of them is we call it externalizing problems, meaning the child when they become adolescents and or at young adults, they become more likely to use aggression to solve problems in their own relationships with others. And also they develop internalizing problems, mainly depression and anxiety disorders when they become adults. So these are long-term consequences, starting from our so-called innocuous lies when they were, preschoolers or elementary school kids.
So with attachment, for instance, the kids take the attachment style that they have toward their caregivers, and then they end up sort of repeating that pattern in other relationships throughout their lives. My parents were both, they both lied as easily as they spoke. And as I got older, I was a liar. I didn't trust other people. And I always figured that I was repeating the patterns that I had learned. Now, that's not to say I didn't have a choice in the matter. Of course I did. And plus you can throw, there's genetics in the mix as well. But what you seem to be saying is that indeed, when parents lie to the kids, these have consequences far beyond just the immediate lies that the parents are telling, not only in terms of the parent-child relationship, but in terms of how the kid ends up interacting with the world.
Yes, so the child basically learns from parents and then generalize this, like these activities to other people in their social relationships, such as friends, girlfriends, boyfriends later on, and co-workers, and their own kids. So the as you mentioned, attachment we form with our parents actually goes down through generations. So there's a multi-generational transfer of the same attachment. And at the same time, our parenting style, how we parent our child gets transmitted to our child, and then our child would transmit to his or her child. The reason for that is for parenting by lying is particularly a very good example. So why do we do it? And sometimes we know, as parents, we know, we always say, you have to be honest. We tell our kids to be honest. But sometimes, why do we lie to our kids? Well, because in many situations, when we tell parenting lies to our kids, is because the situation is very stressful, emotional, and then you look around for tools to deal with the situation. You come up empty. So what comes up very quickly in your mind is the idea that your parents practiced on you, and you grab it and you use it. So that's why, it comes too easily to us because we learned from our parents, and using that then to our own kids, and our own kids also learn, in this kind of situations, I have to do something and then use what I have learned from my parents. So that causes this kind of multi-generational transmission of these not very good parenting practices.
It seems like parents often lie to their kids because it's convenient, because in the short run, it's going to solve a problem. But in reality, it's not really convenient because it's going to create a host of problems down the line, right? Now, how about when kids see their parents lying to other people? Like I remember one time my mother took me to her grandmother's house, right? And my stepfather just didn't want to come. So when we got there, my mother said, "Oh, Jimmy's not feeling well. That's why I didn't come." And I didn't know, so I said, "What do you mean? Jimmy's fine." And my mother said, "No, he's not." So like, what kind of effect does that have?
Yes, so this is another kind of parental lies we tell in front of our kids, but not for parenting purposes. And then so these situations actually are very transparent to children, to you, right? So to me, I remember once, my niece and my sister, we were having dinner, and then someone knock on the door. I guess a salesperson or something. And then my sister just said to my niece, she was like 5, 6 years old, don't tell the person I'm not at home. So my niece just went to the door, said, my mom told me she's not at home, So basically, in this case, it's just teaching your child to lie, right? So all the examples you gave and the examples I gave are the examples the kids actually know what's true and know you are telling something that's not true. And at the same time, and seeing adults doing this. So then they say, okay, mom, you told me I should not lie, but at this moment, you are lying. Or dad, you told me lying is bad, but you're lying in front of me, and you actually recruit me as part of the people to facilitate your lie. So then the child will learn this. Okay, oh, in some situations, I should learn to tell lies. But of course, in some situations, we do have to teach our kids to lie. For example, someone give you a gift you don't like, it's really impolite to tell the person, I don't like your gift, which we would not be nice to the person, the gift giver. So as a parents then, so when we tell these kind of lies in front of our kids, we sometimes encourage our kids to tell these kind of polite lies to other people. We need to provide rationale behind it. We have to tell them these kind of lies are called the fibs, for example. The reason we're doing this is that we don't want to hurt the person's feelings. So you need to justify it. I guess, in many situations, what we tell lies in front of our kids, we don't really provide, good justifications or have a discussion about it. So that's the problem when we, raising our kids in a very busy home environment, or, we just don't find time to set them down and say, okay, this is what I did, this is why I did it, and why you should do that in the future, or why you should not do it in the future in some other situations.
See, it seems to me that the situation of the gift that you told would also be harmful, although parents might judge it to be worth the harm because you're trying to save somebody else's feelings. But from my perspective, there's a few things here. One is that people ought not to be so sensitive. There's no guarantee when you randomly buy somebody a gift that the person's going to like it. So if they don't, so what? I mean, you tried, you did your thing. But also when the parents tell the kid, no, you have to say that you like it, it seems they're elevating factors above what is real. They're elevating somebody's sentiments or somebody's feelings above the reality of the situation. And if kids learn that people's opinions are more important than truth, it seems like that's detrimental, even if the motive is well-intentioned.
So there are multiple schools of thought about this issue. You raised a very, very important philosophical, ethical, and practical issue about telling lies. Some like Kant, for example, believed that you can never lie. Lying is immoral. You cannot lie. For example, his extreme example is if someone is chasing and try to murder someone, then I know where the to be murdered person is hiding. I have no choice but to tell the murderer that where that this person is hiding, because if I lie, it's a violation of one of the ultimate moral things. And so that's one group of thoughts. But the other group of thoughts, theorists and philosophers and practitioners believe that we need sometimes tell lies. So lies basically are not inherently immoral. There are situations in which we ought to lie because truth really hurts. And if truth hurts, it's going to impair your social relationship with others. And so the consequences could be dire. For example, you're going to be bullied at school, and if you're always being blunt to others, and you're not going to have good relationships with others. And so these are the two schools of thought, and people vary from one end to another. But for me, I feel like number one is there's no immorality associated with lying. It depends on the purpose of lying. If the purpose of lying or your intention of lying is to help someone, then in that situation, maybe it's justified.
Mhm.
And the only thing is, when you interact with kids, you have to make sure they understand the rationale behind certain kinds of lies. And this is the part that we don't do very much in our everyday socialization of our kids.
We don't teach them when it's appropriate. See, in Kant it was his duty ethics or ontological ethics. You're right. He taught that lying in and of itself is wrong because there's no real purpose to morality as far as living your life goes. It's just because you have a duty to behave a certain way. So in that situation, if you're going to lie to somebody if they're trying to kill you because you're protecting yourself from them. So I guess what I'm saying is that the ethical thing kind of depends on context, like you said. But just because somebody might irrationally be upset, it would seem to me that wouldn't be the right context. But I guess you're right that you ultimately, regardless of what you believe the appropriate context for lying is, we ought to do a better job of explaining it to the kids.
Yes, and then so interestingly, so if you look at the children who have been diagnosed with, let's say, with ADHD, one of the constant complaints from people around them is that they don't lie. They don't know how to lie. And the same thing is true with children with autism spectrum syndrome. And people also have this complaint that they don't know how to lie. But as a matter of fact, they know how to lie. Just they don't lie, tell kind of lies. Other kids lie. These are the pro-social lies, so-called, or politeness lies, white lies. So they lie, to spare other people's feelings. And in these kind of situations, they fail. And then, so that would tend to create problems between them and their peers. So in a sense, I'm not, advocating everybody should teach their kids to lie, but I'm advocating parents should socialize their children to kind of provide the rationales for certain situations why lying is bad, as well as certain situations lying is okay. But at the same time, so very, very importantly, based upon our recent work in the last 10 years, is that parents, however, must not lie in front of our own kids, because it sets a different example. So this is unfair. In a sense, very weird. We do have to be truthful in front of kids, because when we lie in front of kids, it just models something, and then they would copy. They don't discriminate. Oh, dad lies to me about this because there's a good reason for him to lie. No, the kids don't make this kind of reasoning. So they group all the lies together told by parents as lies. So if my parents lie, then I lie. So from an adult's point of view, we do have to minimize our lying in front of our own kids.
That's a lot of good stuff. Okay. So, first of all, when advocating or trying to teach kids given behaviors, whether lying or anything else, is it best to always explain to them why rather than just do this because I say so? But instead of that, say, do this because, like, for instance, don't jump up and down on the bed because you might fall off and get hurt, right? That is the better approach than the time tested. This is what I say, so do it.
Ideally, yes. Ideally, yes. But as you know, parents with kids in the house, it's chaotic, and we have a lot of obligations. Kids do all sorts of things. So then the problem is that we don't have time, the patience, and the composure to do this. So the thing I think we need to do is we need to be selective about this. Certain important things, then we kind of say do and don'ts, and the certain things we just let them be. So that would be my suggestion. And then certain things we will set our kids down and talk about the issues in question. So I call it teachable moment. So there are situations you run into, like, for example, the lie that your mom or told in front of you, and then that situation created a teachable moment. And then in that teachable moment, if your mom could talk to you about why she did what she did, then everything became clear to you why that situation is a doable situation. But it's very difficult. I raised a child. He is now adult now. It was difficult, and even with one single child, it was difficult. Imagine you have multiple kids in the house. So
Well, right. There's times you simply don't have time to explain why the kid can't do something. If the kid is in immediate danger, it has to be don't do it because I say so, right? You don't have time to explain it. But you mentioned modeling behavior. And I know that it's very important, not what parents say, but what they do, how they behave. That's, I believe, social learning theory, like Albert Bandura, for instance. But what is the mechanism, or what are the reasons why such modeling is so important?
yes, so this we always thought before Bandura that learning is through reinforcement or conditioning, but Bandura showed to us that kids and adults really watch others, and then they do what they learn implicitly through observation. So observational learning is a very, very powerful form of learning, and there's almost no need for even reinforcement. So that's the power of observational learning. And then not only we do it, other primates do it, and animals do it. Like, I'm talking about dogs do it, and the crows do it. So animals also do it. So learning by observation seems to be a very efficient way of transmitting knowledge from one person to another, and from one animal to another. So I think we as humans, thanks to Bandura, that we now realize the importance of observational learning, but we don't do that as enough, and we don't realize its importance in our practical activities enough. For example, we learn a lot from our priests. We learn a lot from our teachers. We learn a lot from our parents, just by watching them. And just sometimes it takes one act of the other person you watch, and you learn like this. So it's very efficient, and then it's long lasting. So my suggestion to parents is, you really have to model, what you say. So for example, I know a lot of parents do these two kinds of things. Okay, one is they sometimes say like this. Okay, Michael, if you tell me the truth, I will. You broke my cherished vase. I will not be angry. And then you say, okay, since mom said that, I'm going to say, mom, I broke your vase. What happened? Parents became angry. Mom became angry. Because they say, so then the child learned very quickly. Say, okay, next time it's better. I'm not going to tell the truth. So this is a clear way of modeling. You set up a rule and you break it yourself. Another one is lying, right? You're lying to others in front of you, lying to you directly, and then you figure this out. And then that kind of modeling becomes instantly ingrained in your brain. It's translated into your action when you encounter similar situations. So I think, parents really, really need to pay attention to what we do, and then live up to our words. If we say something, we really have to do it. If we say honesty is important, then you should be honest to your kids. So I try to do this from my kids. I try to be honest, but at the same time, I have to confess. I also did parenting by lying. So when we published our first study about this, I had to confess to my child I had been doing lying to him, because I took him to school when he was about 3. So we have to drive for about 30 to 40 minutes to his school. Sometimes, and then he got antsy in the back of the car. He started screaming, yelling. So what I said, okay, look, the emergency button. I said, this button is actually not emergency button. It is a launch button. So if you keep on screaming, yelling, and I'm going to push this button, then what happens is your back seat, your car seat, is going to fly off through the roof of my car. So every time when he acted up, so I put my hand in front of that button, and immediately he would calm down. And I used this for about a couple of years, but then my paper got published, so I had to confess to him that was a lie. But anyhow, because I didn't know at that time, it was not a good parenting practice. So since then, learning from my research, my own research, I decided, I try to be very honest to him about almost everything, even including sometimes, he did something not very, his piano playing was not very good. I just say it's not good. Something. So.
How do parents' beliefs about honesty correlate with whether or not they actually lie to the kids? In other words, if parents say honesty is the best policy and lying is wrong, does that mean that they'll necessarily be truthful to their kids and in front of their kids?
Unfortunately, no. So the majority of parents we have surveyed, all believe the lying to be wrong, and they do it to a varying degrees, but there's no correlation between how much they lie to our kids for parenting purposes and how much they believed in honesty. We have to be honest to each other, the degree of that. So basically, what do you believe in your head is totally different from what you do to your kids. So, this is common. So we are kind of, in a sense, we are moral hypocrites as humans, as adults, because think about this: the majority of us know, lying is wrong, but you must have. I confess, I occasionally will tell lies, and you probably have told lies on your daily lives, from day to day, and we adults tell lies quite a bit, actually, on a daily basis. But it does not mean we do not know lying is bad, So there's a divorce between, the moral knowledge and your moral actions.
I'm a big believer of being honest with kids and not lying in front of them. But an example of my own hypocrisy is when it comes to things like Santa Claus or the Tooth Fairy. I think, to myself, well, there's only one time in a kid's life where they can engage in that kind of fantasy, where they'll be able to believe in that. And it's was so much fun for me as a kid. So I figure, well, that there's no harm in teaching kids this stuff. And then, when they get to be of age, you tell them the truth. Is it harmful? Should we be teaching kids to believe in Santa and the Easter Bunny?
So this is so interesting question, excellent question. So I practiced this as well as you did. When my kid was growing up, we celebrate Santa Claus, and the gift and put them away, and milk and cookie, whatever. We create all the possibilities to convince our kids, my child, they're Santa Claus, and then so this is a question. Like, we did study it a little bit, but we haven't really specifically studied it. We asked parents to report, and they practice this. People actually practice it across the world according to their cultural practice. There are always certain kind of, fairies in their culture, and the parents use them for various purposes, including what you said. Create a magic in a child's life. It's facilitated their imagination and things like that. And there's a good reasons we do this every single year, and also about Tooth Fairy, about Easter Bunny. So, however, one of the things we have found is, this is something I really want to do an international study. I want to know, like, so as you said, parents think, well, when my child grows up at a certain age, I'm going to tell, right? But it turns out the many of us, I don't know, you have had a similar experience. So many of us discover these kind of lies about magical beings, Santa Claus, Tooth Fairy, Easter Bunny, all almost on the same day, like around the same time. We had this big bang in our head. And that was a tremendously traumatic for people. So you suddenly discovered these magical things are not true. You believed in for so long. That's number one. Number two is, your parents have been lying to you for that long. And that is a very, very, soul-shattering period. And so I talked to my child about this, and he said that, his friends told him in his class, who, let's say they were, some Jewish kids in his class, they did not practice, Christmas or Santa Claus, and they would tell Nathan, that's not true. This Santa Claus does not exist. But but still takes a long time because they are classmates, so he wouldn't believe. So there's a slow period of change in his beliefs. But again, some of my students, like I talked to one of my students, and then her parents really, really liked the practice of Santa Claus, the gifts, the cookie and stuff. Her father every single year would go out and put big shoes on and climb up and put the footprint on the roof and did everything. And every year would show her, say, look, last night Santa Claus came, here are the footprints. So she was totally convinced until when she was a teenager and she had an argument with her classmates. The classmate told her that's not true. So she went home, asked her mom, said, Mom, so-and-so told me Santa Claus is not true. Is that true? Mom said, no, it's not true. Then she said, what about the tooth fairy? No, Mom said it's not true. She said, what about Easter Bunny? No, that's not true. So boom, boom, boom. So when we did our study, she said that this, she had vivid memories of how traumatized she experienced on that day. So she remembered vividly. This is after about 10, 15 years. She was a PhD student. Anyhow, so I'm just relating to you about this. I want to do a study all over the world to find out when we, as adults, discover this, and how that discovery of these, long-held beliefs were shattered, and how they impact on our psychological well-being and how we do things in our everyday life. So this is something I really want to do. I haven't really started yet. I had some ethical concerns about this, because there's debate among ourselves whether or not these kind of lies are really lies. Some people just call it, this just a perpetuation of good cultural practices.
Yeah.
Right. So
Okay, Professor Lee, is there anything that I didn't ask or anything you didn't get to say that you think is important to cover in this topic?
I think we covered most of the stuff. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Okay, so where can people find you?
Or they can just Google me, Kang Lee, and they should see my name, and they can find out other stuff I'm doing in my lab.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. I love this topic. I find it very fascinating.
Thank you so much. Have a
For
nice day.
now, this is the Rational Egoist signing out. I'm Michael Leibowitz. Remember, I want to know what you think. Tell me. Give me your likes, your dislikes, your comments. I want it all. Till next time.